should make as a company, right, become more innovative, reduce costs, cut excesses. But instead of doing that, the central bank is doing it on your behalf by making your debt cheaper, and therefore that slows down the restructuring.
I think that is one of the big mega trends which haven't really been covered recently, because if you look at it, you've got outliers like people like Elon Musk who are trying to make batteries available to beyond cars and to all gadgets, but he would be an outlier, right? And you look at the really the forefront of innovators in the last few years, Apple. What are they using the excess cash for? Buybacks. Come on, I mean, whenever you've got to stop doing things like that with the excess cash, it's a short on the future. That's what it is.
In those instances, generally you find that a lot of American companies and most of developed European companies would do a lot of share buybacks when they have cash. It's because a lot of the CEOs have a lot of share options.
Yeah, and it's all about short-termism, which is wrong, right?
So I mean, it gets back to it. If the central banks were to start to deleverage, means buying back, to deleverage the liquidity from the system, what kind of calamity are we going to see? I believe that the calamity is not going to be so great or devastating, or the correction is devastating. Why I say that is that if you look at one of the reasons why Bill Ross is very, very negative now is that the recent yields on German bonds is like zero.
Yes.
Among other places,
I think it's slightly negative.
You're going to pay them a bit of money.
So when that's the case, you are looking at exactly the scenario of what Japan went through from 1990 till about just recently. Still, that's like they lost 20, 30 years. All right. Well, of course, Japan's problem is more structural in terms of they never did any of the hard decisions when the stock market collapsed. The bank loans, the bad debts were not written off for a very, very long time. So, but in this case, I do believe that the rest of the global economy, there were a lot of, they will write off the bad debts, and restructuring is still taking place. But what we are seeing is that when you have zero or slightly negative yields on major bonds, that tells you what the general investing community is thinking about stock returns, risk and return. So the end, to me, is just going to mean zero flat returns from the stock market, or maybe just 1 or 2% for the next 5-10 years. You're not going to get the kind of returns that you got in the last, on average over the last 10-20 years.
I think there is a chance, even a high chance, of it being more apocalyptic than what you have just described, because you're describing a situation which is quite neutral, right? Stocks will be neutral, stocks have no more potential, but for many years now, the central banks around the world, especially in the States and Japan and so on, they have been trying to kickstart their economies to no success. And if these economies meet with another recession or God forbid, another depression, then they would have run out of ammunition, because they can't expand their balance sheets anymore. And that is when the real restructuring would have to take place, and the real restructuring would take place by the crash of prices.
I do believe that there is at certain asset prices, let's say for property, for example, globally, that has been it is totally unsustainable over the longer term. But what I see is that, because why I say that if there is going to be a crash, it may not be as bad, because interest rates are very, very low. It is not something that if you had a crash, say interest rates is say now like 5-6%, and suddenly it just hikes up 3%, 300 basis point, which is a shock to the system
over many years.
No. Just say like the oil shock and all this thing, and then you have this kind of crash because of something unanticipated. But the way that we're looking here is that it is highly unlikely we're going to see interest rate moving up at all, which kind of like would engineer a softer landing, or in terms of correction.
So what you
I